Okay, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope you're all well, bi'iznillahi ta'ala, and welcome to our session. This is our winter session. We're now in a time where things have changed. So we've changed the session a little bit, and we're having it at 6 p.m. That's UK time. So we're live now, and we've already had some questions that came through. So let me try and bring them up. It's a very interesting week, lots happening in the world once again. But what's been happening in your life? That's important. We're all focused on, of course, rightly so, on global events. But what's happening in the world right now? So that's also important for all of us. So I'm just gonna just make sure that I can access things and we can take things from there, inshallah ta'ala. And we'll see questions coming through as and when. All right. So let's have a look. Okay, we're live. I think we're live, and people should be able to hear. Alhamdulillah wa alaikum salam from our Akbari friend, Akbari and Sufi. How are you doing? How are you all? Um, Wonderful to have you all live again, bi'iznillahi ta'ala. So, Akbarian, wonderful to have you on our channel. Uh, let's have a look. Hawker. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum. Welcome to our Q&A. So, welcome to you all. And let's see what people have been up to. Let's see what kind of questions that people have to ask. Insha'Allah ta'ala. All right. So I'm just going to close StreamYard. Okay. So there you go. So in the UK now, Fajr is quite late. So if you don't know, in winter, as in now, we have Fajr, which is almost at 7 a.m. We can have Isha at 6:30 or 6:45. So in our masjid, Isha is at 6:45. We have a Hanbali on our group, Muhammad Umar al Hanbali, rahimahullah ta'ala, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, great alim. And we have a Hanbali in our group. Always welcome. We love competition and our intellectual tradition. Now, the Sunni tradition has four madhahib, of course. There were many more before. The Hanafis, who are the dominant ones in terms of number, but you have the Hanbalis, you have the Malikis, you have Shafi'is. So we're all part of this rich tradition. I mentioned last week, by the way, Muhammad Umar, you just reminded me. There's a book that I think people should read. Someone asked me that what's a good theoretical book to read, yani, in terms of trying to understand Islam and unity and diversity, and how Islam, while it's a monotheistic tradition, i.e., we believe in one Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there's an idea that there's only one truth. How do we reconcile that with the fact that we have so much diversity in our religion? Not division, diversity. So we have Hanbalis, Malikis, Shafi'is, we have schools of law, fiqh, we have schools of theology, Aqidah, Kalam, but we also have Sufi tariqas, and we have so much diversity. It's a very rich tradition. So, one book that I think is somewhat useful, I found this book very, very useful. I read this when I was traveling. It's not very long, it's maybe like 200 pages, yani, maybe less. It's called Life Worlds of Islam, Muhammad Bamir, worth reading. And it's good because it kind of gives you the theory of how Islam works. Okay. So I hope that's useful. Of course, a good author. I'm writing a chapter on him, Shah Waliullah. It should be finished in the next few days, inshallah, ready to send to Oxford University Press and maybe publish at some point in the near future. That's worth looking at, inshallah ta'ala, as well. Um, Muhammad Umar had a question. What is the Prophet's advice, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for us to do during the end of times? Well, first and foremost, um, we are meant to be doing what we've always been asked to do, which is to worship Allah. And so we are meant to continue doing this even when the last Muslim is here, or we are at the end of times. The Prophet ﷺ, to a nearest effect, said that even if you're planting something, planting a seed in the ground, and you see or you hear that a trumpet is being blown, you should still carry on doing good works. In other words, he's telling you, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that carry on doing good works. Don't be a fatalist. Don't be like, oh, it's the end of times. No, things could change. Things could become better for us, a lot better, and things could get worse. But we carry on as Muslims, carry on doing the work. Okay, when the Crusades took Palestine, it was a difficult moment for the Ummah. They remained patient, they planned, they reorganized, and after a few decades, Allah gave them Futuhat. Allah gave them Salahud Ayyubi, who united the Ummah, gave them Futuhat. Allah Ta'ala, many times in the Ummah, we've had difficult moments, but we've managed to bounce back. So we should carry on doing what we can, Muhammad, to what Allah's asked us, which is, i.e., um, which is that one should carry on doing good works, like what we're doing, teaching, researching, writing. Keep on doing good works, because Allah will only ask you about what you did with what was within your capabilities. Okay, so there are global events, but locally you can do good works. You can help your local mosque. You can establish things in your local communities. Keep on doing good works. Okay. So Roshan, mashallah, what are Hanafi? So Ahmad Reza Khan is also Hanafi himself, and he is the founder, if you like, or the one who has the name attributed to the Bareilly school. So I wouldn't get involved in polemics. I wouldn't get involved in all of these things. Yes, they're useful for academic studies. I personally don't promote division in the Ummah. I follow the Akbari, I follow the Dehlawi, I follow that manhaj, which is about bringing the Ummah together. Uh, Not exclusivist Islam. I don't believe in exclusivist Islam. That's my way. My way is to bring everyone within Islam. A good book to read is, if you want one in English, which is useful, Yani, is to read Sher Ali Talin's book, Muhammad in Modernity. Read that book, you'll get everything that you need, Yani. So don't get involved in polemics, Roshan. Read it, Yani, with the intention of knowing history and understanding why these things came about, but don't let it shape your worldview. Don't let it shape the way you interact with fellow beings, okay, fellow human beings or fellow Muslims. I want to follow the Shazili Tariqa in Tasawwuf. Could you please guide me in this? If you reach out to me, I'll try and put you in some friends who can help you. One of the things that's very, very important in Tasawwuf is that, I mean, it's not an obligation to follow a school of Tasawwuf, but nowadays it's useful, is that you should try and find a tariqa, a sheikh, with whom you have munasabah with. What does munasabah mean? Nisba, i.e., you have congeniality with them, conviviality, i.e., you can relate to them, you can work with them, you trust them. Remember that when you're studying ilm, when you're in the madrasa, the sheikh, the teacher, is you're supposed to learn. It's a learning environment where there's dialogue. So you might want to ask questions, you might want to interrogate something more. That's fine to expand your horizons. But when you're following a Sufi tariqa, usually what you're doing is you're putting trust in that sheikh, that he's a well guided sheikh, he's well recognized, and he will guide me. I'll follow him in tasawwuf, right? So that's very, very important to make that distinction between the madrasa, where you learn and you are supposed to ask questions. Like, I encourage my students to ask questions, I encourage my students to challenge me, no problem. But if you're taking tasawwuf from me, then it's different. If you're in the khanka, you're in the zawiya, then you're trusting the sheikh and you're following his spiritual guidance. So there's a difference between intellectual learning and spiritual cleansing. When you're cleansing, you're trusting your doctor, you're trusting the Hakim. Remember that, Muhammad, okay? Uh, Question: since you have experience in both academic and traditional studies, what's your opinion on academic fiqh tradition, where they call for ijtihad from non-mujtahids and deviate greatly? Uh, since you have experienced both, what's your opinion on academic fiqh tradition? So ijtihad has always been a contested term, and ijtihad and taqlid is specific to law, right? So when we talk about ijtihad and taqlid, we're talking about fiqh in particular. And the reality is that because uh, the world changes and the world's constantly evolving, whether for ill or for good, you always need to respond to new circumstances. So for 100 years ago, for example, we didn't have modern treatments in medication, when it comes to medication, or we didn't have the same moral dilemmas that, legal dilemmas that our forefathers even had, mobile phones, technology, improvements in healthcare. So, by nature, if we accept that the world's changing, then you're always doing ijtihad in a certain way. So there's different levels of ijtihad, and ulama have talked about the maratib, or the levels of ijtihad. So Shah Waliullah has talked about this. Many ulama have talked about ijtihad. In terms of ijtihad at the school level, i.e., creating your own school from scratch, like Imam Abu Hanifa and the four Imams and others, that's not really going to happen. But you can do ijtihad within the school, so you'll have different views and you'll come to different conclusions, which is fine. Um, and a lot of fiqh was written in an age where Muslims were in power. They could enforce a lot of the rulings. You had the state, Islamic State, endorsing those legal pronouncements. You had the qadi, but we don't really have that in the West, right? Where it's kind of voluntary in some ways, if you like, at least in a secular sense, i.e., you're asking the mufti because you're trying to get some guidance. But there's nothing in the dunya there's no authority that can force you to do it. But you're always going to be responding to new scenarios. You're always going to be responding to new questions. But you can find them if you're trained really well. If you're able to abstract the fiqh, you're able to then think about, okay, well, this is what needs to happen, yani. So I'm just mentioning that. Um, as from non-mujtahids, if you're not trained in Islamic sciences, you shouldn't even get into these things. So if you're not trained, you don't know, you can't read Arabic, you don't know the Quran, you don't know the Sunnah, you don't know how it all works, you don't know the philosophy of it all, you don't know theology, then you should follow your local imam. You're doing taqleed of him. You're following your local imam or your local sheikh, because you're not. If I say to you, if somebody says to me, Maulana Harun, Sheikh Harun, you said this, and is the hadith sahih? And I tell you, oh, it's sahih, or is za'if, or is hasan li dhatihi, how are you going to know what it all means? Like, how does it even make sense to you? If you're asking me to verify something, then it's based on the assumption that you know what all of that means. So that's not how it works, though, because you're not in a position, for example, to know if this is the right thing. You have to do taqleed. So we're always doing taqleed. We're always following people before us in every way, like in every shape or form. But at the same time, those of us who are trained are going to have to do ijtihad. We're going to. I don't mean ijtihad as in like rewriting fiqh. What I mean is ijtihad in responding to new scenarios. And what that then means is that we should be more open-minded. We should be more tolerant of people who have different views, as long as they show their methodology, as long as we say in mathematics, they show they're working. All right. If you email me, Muhammad, or if you just Google my details, you'll find it, or just Twitter or something, you'll find it there. Inshallah, message me. All right. How do we balance aspirations, life, and being content? For example, aspirational work. Yeah, that's a very good question, Muhammad Umar. You should be aspirational. Like, you should wish, you should want to do well in life, right? But you should get to a level where you're content with that as well. So there's nothing wrong with having yani aspiration to do well, like do well academically, or on various platforms, or in school or in work. We should be excelling in every field. We should be, at the moment, Muslims are not creators of anything. We don't create anything. We're just consumers. Even YouTube that we're using, or Twitter, it's all created by other people that are not Muslims. Medication, in every field, we're just consumers. When it comes to technology, cars, planes, we just use them. We're beholden to these systems. But what we need to do is get to a place where we are the ones who are creating these systems. We are the ones who are inventors. And then when you become an inventor of something, you have a lot of power, a lot of influence. So that's important. Being content is knowing in your heart that you're doing it for the right reasons, doing it to please Allah, doing it to make the world better, and not doing it because you just want to make lots and lots of money. You should be making good money, and you should be investing that in the ummah, supporting scholars like me, so I can sit on YouTube more and educate more, rather than me trying to work, a job and trying to teach people at the same time. That's just an example. So we should have these motivations. We should learn from other communities who have invested billions of pounds in educating their community. So we should get to that level. We should know that whatever happens, ill or good, it is from the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah is in control of all our affairs. So being aspirational and being content, they're not opposites. That knowing that I will try my best, but sometimes I might not reach that. Okay. So even when you're at work, Muhammad, you should try and become the best. Eventually, you set up your own business, right? And being good at it, being the best at it. So I hope that helps, insha'Allah ta'ala, on your journey. Okay. Some really good questions coming through. We had someone asked a question. I don't know if I can post it. Uh, okay. So here's a question. I don't know if I can put it on here, but I will try. Um, I'll share it. So someone asked that I feel I procrastinate, i.e., I waste time a lot. Could you advise me, especially on any practical tools to help overcome them? Okay, I seem yeah, this is a big problem. The way technology is created, it's to keep you busy, to keep you scrolling shorts, short videos, keep you engaged, and we are entertaining ourselves to death. So I have rules that I try and follow. So, for example, I think I mentioned this before. I have tartib. What I mean by tartib is I have a routine that I try to follow as best as I can. So, for example, in the morning, Fajr, Quran, kids, madrasa, the education, school. Once they go to school, I come to my desk over here, and I literally don't look at anything else. I have 50 minutes blocks. So I have a clock on my computer. I log on and I work for 50 minutes, and then when the clock rings, I go for a walk, 10-minute break, coffee, whatever, come back, work for 50 minutes. So morning time is usually typing, and then afternoon time, when I'm a bit more tired, I usually, sometimes if I'm tired, I nap, because I can sleep anywhere. Or sometimes what I do is I read a book. So I do that. I respond to emails. I have email time. Evening time, I'll check social media when I'm tired. So usually, like after Isha, I'll look on the internet. I'll just see what's happening. But my phone basically goes off, or it's not with me in the evening, usually speaking, unless my wife is out or my kids are out and I need my phone with me. I leave my phone in charge, and I won't look at it. Um, if people, I won't look at WhatsApp, and I won't look at these things. A lot of these things are just time wasting. Another thing that's really helpful is set yourself targets. So join a class, studying something, Arabic or whatever, and keep yourself busy. Set yourself times during the day, in the evening, where you're reading a book, a nice book. Read a chapter in the evening and go to bed. You should not be going to bed after you've just watched TV or you've been on the internet. That's the big a no. So keeping yourself focused, maybe writing down a routine for your week. So Monday to Friday for me is very busy, absolutely busy. Like I just fill everything into it. And then Friday night I try to wind down. Saturdays with the kids. So I teach on a Saturday morning, but after I finish teaching, after Darul Uloom, I finish teaching. We usually go out with the girls and spend the day out afternoon, and that's like our family time. So we have scheduled Sundays when I start getting ahead of the week, checking my email, just preparing things. So having a tartib is very, very important. People might invite me to things. I'm very judicious about where I go. Is it beneficial for me to go there? Am I going to achieve anything? These sort of things. Um, so, um, so that's important. Yeah, Muhammad. So you have to get into elite circles, and that's pragmatic. You have to be pragmatic. Um, they control and influence, but Allah Ta'ala can change things. Learn from them. See how they got their educational systems, networks. Sometimes we have to get into those places. Maybe not for the ulama. One of the things that we have a lot of ulama, alhamdulillah, a lot of graduates, but we don't have statespeople. We don't have people who think strategically. I don't mean ulama. What I mean is people who think pragmatically, people who can think at a systems level, strategic level. We need people like that. We need thinkers. Not people who just repeat stuff and tell you what you already know or just massage your ego or make you feel good, but actually people who really think deeply and about things. So, inshallah, it can happen. We need to organize. We just need a few. We don't need that many. We don't need loads. We're a huge population globally, but we just need to get organized. Funding, money comes with that. Influence comes with that. Yeah. I don't think so. The best way to memorize things is to keep studying, if it makes sense. To teach people what you've learned is useful, but the more you read different fields or whatever field you're going into, the more it opens up horizons. So you don't need to memorize things. Imam Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala, had a very strong memory, but we misunderstand what it means by memory. It wasn't like you pulled him up on the road and just asked him things and he just memorized them. He memorized them and he knew them, he understood them because he was so engaged in that science, ilmul rijal. He studied this science so much, like it was almost like he knew all the people. He knew where they lived, he knew how long they lived for, he knew who met who, you know. That was because he was so immersed in the field, like he could just talk about it, right? And that's what happens to people when they learn so much, mashallah ta'ala, that they are able to just talk about our subjects off the cuff because they're so engaged in it. When people have superficial knowledge, they just use vibes and they just kind of like, say sentences and this and that, but they're not able to really go into depth. You can tell very, very clearly between someone who's really read something, a subject matter, and someone who's just, just superficially just read a few introductory books or just heard things. Samina, we've heard someone say this. Whereas someone who really goes into it, drills into the depth of that subject, really know they go beyond the foundations, they go beyond memorization. Memorization is very, very useful, but it's the understanding, the tafaqquh that comes. That will make sure that you've memorized it deeply. So I hope that makes sense, Oka, in terms of um, memorizing. But also remember that memorizing has an important pedagogical tool because when it comes to liturgical aspects, when it comes to qira'ah, when it comes to khutbah, when it comes to these sort of things, yeah, memorize is very, very useful. Knowing hadith by heart, these sort of things are very, very useful. So it has a very important role. But then you get to a stage where you have a deep understanding of how all of that comes together. How do you make sense of all of that? All right. So I hope that helps, inshallah ta'ala. Okay. So someone's asked a very touchy question about Zionism, um, and why do they feel that they have a divine right? You will have to read some books on this topic. I can recommend some that you should read um, to understand it. It's not something that I have, time or huge expertise in, but I'll just put it here. So I'll just put a question up. So Zionism, where does this idea come from? Who gave them this idea? There are books that you can read that can help you on this topic. There's lots of books that you can read. There's some beginners book, some very, very easy books that you can read. So I would say like a really easy book to read is 10 Myths About Israel by Ilham Mbappe. Okay, that's a good book to read. Very easy, very accessible. You can read it like just sitting down one night with a cup of coffee. It's not that difficult to read. Um, there's a good book that I would also recommend, a bit more advanced, but still very, very useful, is by these are all by non-Muslims. So you can't be accused of being biased. There's a book by someone called Shlomo Sand, The Invention of the Jewish People. That's a useful book to read as well. Shlomo San, The Invention of the Jewish People. That's something that you can read. Um, One of my favorite books that I really, really enjoyed reading, and I do go back to it time and time again, is by someone called Rashid Khalidi, who's obviously a Muslim. He has a book, The 100 Years War on Palestine, The History of Settler Colonial Conquest and Resistance, 1917 to 2017. That book's also very, very useful. Um, for a broader reading, there's a book that it's very useful. It's called Age of Anger: A History of the Present by Pankaj Mishra. Worth reading that. Must read that to understand some of the broad understandings or underpinnings that are important. And the final book, I absolutely love this book as well, and I think this is a good theoretical book. It's by Mahmoud Mamdani, and it's called Neither Settler Nor Native: The Making and Unmaking of Permanent Minorities. So that's a really, really good book. If you really want to understand colonialism and where Israel gets these ideas from and the roots of it all, and you want to go right back to America and how America came about, and even before that, with the Reconquista, where Muslims and Jews were literally murdered or killed or forced to convert. That was the prototype. So that book's really good to use. So I've given you yeah, so you can get into all of this. You can read it all. There's lots of other books that you can read. It's worth having these books on your bookshelf or having copies of them and reading them. You'll be then you'll be equipped to deal with a lot of the myths, a lot of the talking points. They use the same talking points. Stuff like there was nothing in Palestine before we came, before 1940, which is barren land. They use all these ideas. We were there from the time of the Romans, all of this stuff. So you can really come back to all of this. So anyway, you can read all that in your own time, inshallah ta'ala. But we live in tough times because, of course, if you say anything, you can lose your job, you can get banned, you can get cancelled. So it shows the extent to which we live in a so-called liberal or open society, right? How tolerant we actually are. We talk about tolerance, we talk about openness, but then, all of a sudden, there's certain things that you can't say. There's certain things that you're not able to talk about because it's problematic. So can you see there is no pure openness, there is no pure tolerance, liberty, these sort of things, right? Um, there has to be places they're always going to clamp down on things you don't like. Everybody's liberal, everybody's open-minded until someone says something you don't like. As soon as they say something you don't like, it doesn't suit your agenda, then you say, oh, cancel him, oh, ban him, oh, we don't want this, we don't want that. So we don't really live in a liberal society. It's just a facade. It's just everybody feels, and I think that's the worst form of imprisonment. One is to be in prison and know that you're in the prison. The second is you don't even know you're imprisoned. You don't even know that your mind is caged. Your horizons are restricted, and somehow you think you're free just because you can walk down and buy, a McDonald's, or you can drive around, or you can buy a few things. You think you live in a liberal society. To what extent are we free? To what extent are we allowed to think about certain things? To what extent are we allowed to talk about certain things even? And you've seen over the last few weeks how the liberal paradigm has just shut down everyone, right? So anyway, that's a rant, but something for you to think about. We should learn about Judaism. You should learn about Zionism, the differences, the similarities. You should learn how Zionism is rooted in a certain Christian understanding of the end of times, these sort of things. Very, very interesting to read. But read it from proper books. Don't read silly stuff. Read proper academic books. Read proper stuff so you don't sound like an idiot who's parroting nonsense, right? Yeah, Muhammad, look, Habibi, listen. You have to be optimistic. You have to be honest with yourself. Um, the prophet, all the prophets, all the prophets had challenges. You think they came into their communities and people just accepted them? Look in the Quran. They were rejected by their people. Some were killed, some were banished. The Prophet ﷺ wasn't accepted by his own people. How much hard work did the Prophet do to get just a group of believers? Do you understand? When you're trying to reform society and people are brainwashed to think in a certain way, a lot of people are brainwashed. They completely, their minds are closed. Yani, you're living in a society where people think they are free, but they are utterly brainwashed. Right? This is one of the geniuses, if you like, of a liberal society. People think they're liberal, but many of them are deep down illiberal at all. They're completely illiberal. They're completely intolerant, and their minds are completely shut. They've just got the blinkers. Like a horse when they put these blinkers. They don't see anything else. They're living in Plato's cave, including Muslims. Right? Muslims can't think outside the box. They lack confidence. They have inferiority complex. You should be confident. You should have belief, and that comes through knowledge, and that comes through ibadah. That comes through all of these things. Allah says in the Quran, وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ. Look at this. Allah says, those people who are endowed with a deep understanding, يَقُولُونَ آمَنَّا بِهِ. They say we believe. So when you read and you study and you keep progressing and you sit with the right type of people, your iman increases. Mm. It's the only thing Allah in the Quran asks increase for. وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا. Increase me in knowledge. So Muslims, we should be increasing in knowledge. We should be pushing the frontiers. So we should be optimistic. Allah Ta'ala can change things. And it's also a way of cleansing, right? You have believers who are just sort of like on the edges, but you want to be a strong believer. And this is part of living in a dunya. This dunya is never meant to be paradise for us. This dunya has no worth in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These people are fighting over the scraps of the dunya, metal and oil and all these things. When you go to Jannah, you'll forget about all the troubles in the dunya. As the hadith says, that a person will be taken who was the most miserable person in the dunya. He had nothing. He had the most miserable life. And he'll be dipped in Jannah just for a moment. Just for a moment. And then he'll be asked, did you experience any difficulty? He said, I've never experienced any difficulty. Because that moment in Jannah will make you forget about it all. So never lose hope. Keep going, keep working hard. We're working for the akhirah. But at the same time, we're trying within our limited horizons and our limited capabilities to make the world a better place. And we have to believe Islam is the only solution. We have to be uncompromising in that. Okay? That doesn't mean we fight and argue with people, but we present it in the best of ways. We present our arguments to people. So I hope that helps Muhammad Umar. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. That's the struggle. But there's a way of appreciating that this is natural, understanding that this is not utopia. This isn't paradise. This was never meant to be paradise. Paradise is where we're going to, inshallah ta'ala. Tamam? Okay, wonderful, mashallah ta'ala. We've had a slightly longer session, but we did start a bit late. I want to thank you all for giving me your time coming on here. It's been wonderful. I really enjoy and look forward to these sessions. And inshallah ta'ala, I look forward to seeing you all next week, 6 p.m. UK time, same time, inshallah ta'ala. And we'll catch up then. Okay, everyone, have a lovely weekend. Allah bless and preserve one and all. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu ala khayrika Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi.